The puppy was awkward, maybe 8 weeks old. The color is brindle, mostly boxer, but it is clear that there are other breeds in the mix. He noticed the woman looking at him through the bars and turned on his puppy charm, wagging his tail and moving towards the front of the cage. The woman stuck her hand into the cage and the dog licked it, hoping that this was the ticket to finding a forever home. The woman's gaze told the puppy that he was on the right path. He wagged his tail and began to lick her even more. The woman's eyes opened wide, tears welling up in the inner corners of her eyes. She turned to the man kneeling behind her. "Yes, this guy," she said, "and you will feed him, walk him, and take care of him." He said, his voice so full of disbelief that the puppy could almost understand him. "Well, yeah, he'll be my little buddy and follow me around and protect me and everything," she said. He rolled his eyes, making no attempt to hide his pessimism. She had made similar promises before, and almost every time, responsibility for everything she wanted ended up falling on him. Gardening, cooking, hanging out with a 6th grader from Nigeria, and much more. He really didn't want to take care of the dog, too, but what could he say? You do everything for those you love. "Okay, we'll take that Big Eyes that's looking at her from the cage," Bryce England said to the man at the animal shelter. "Wrap it up and attach a bow. You won't be able to pick him up today. He needs to be sterilized first," the shelter worker said. "We can do this tomorrow, and if everything goes well, then the day after tomorrow you can pick him up." "Hank," Brittany said, England to the man who gave her a puzzled look. "We'll take Hank home the day after tomorrow." "That's right." He smiled, sneaking a peek into her blouse as he stood up from his knees behind her husband. Bryce caught this attempt to look into the blouse and grinned to himself. This was hardly the first time some crook had tried to look down his big-breasted wife's blouse. She probably didn't even notice anymore because it was trivial, something like an occupational hazard. The animal grew from a puppy and turned into a fairly large dog. For the first 3 weeks, Brittany looked after him, and then she gradually shifted her responsibilities to Bryce. As he took charge of the dog, the animal gradually shifted its allegiance to Bryce. Brittany still liked him, but dogs are even simpler than people. Their first affection goes to the one who feeds them and takes care of them. "You see, it's you who should take care of him since he likes him better," she once said, when he reminded her of her promise to take care of the dog. "He likes me best because I care about him," Bryce snorted. "Dogs are very simple, but you women—" Brittany knew where this would lead. She fluttered her eyelashes at her husband of 10 years and stuck out her impressive chest in a tight pink top. Bryce was practically salivating. "Men are so simple." I thought she was talking to herself. Brittany. I knew that she was the most difficult person in this relationship. She knew they weren't going to get any less difficult anytime soon, and she knew her husband didn't deserve the pain that was coming. Brittany and Bryce recently celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary. Bryce thought he had the perfect wife and the perfect marriage. Of course, the couple sometimes quarreled, but never over anything important. Okay, he was a Cubs fan, and Brittany loved the White Sox. This is perhaps the biggest topic of debate, he thought. But I thought wrong. Brittany, assistant vice president at an international insurance company. She worked for World X-Ray for 9 years, with Anand Patel as her direct boss for the last 6. They worked well together professionally and became good friends. Brittany and Bryce even spent time with Anand and his wife outside the office. Bryce liked this man. For 3 years, Brittany and Anand were nothing more than colleagues and friends. She thought her boss was pleasant, charming, and handsome. He's 45, fit, with salt and pepper black hair and big brown eyes. His Indian heritage gave him a light brown complexion, and his British training gave him a typical high-grade British accent. His baritone voice gave him an almost lawyerly type of mellifluous speech. Brittany, I never thought about cheating on Bryce. She considered her husband no less handsome than her boss. He had light brown hair and large, expressive blue eyes. He spent several evenings in the gym and looked the part. He fit the profile of a chartered accountant perfectly, being quiet and thoughtful. He wasn't very social, but Brittany knew his love for her knew no bounds. Brittany knew he was also quite skilled in bed. Brittany and Anand sometimes went to lunch and talked about business. Over time, this developed into conversations about their personal lives. It wasn't until a few years later that the couple started meeting for lunch purely for personal reasons, and it quickly became the norm. Anand knew that women found him desirable, but he was not a serial skirt hunter. Before this, he cheated only twice in marriage. Neither he nor Brittany had any plans to take this friendship any further, until it happened. About 6 months after starting private dinners, the couple found themselves in bed at a hotel during a long lunch break. Brittany was surprised that after her first relationship with Anand, she was not consumed by a feeling of guilt. They made love twice that first time, and both enjoyed it immensely. They weren't doing anything that she hadn't done before with Bryce, but the fact that this was the first time she had sex with someone other than her husband in a dozen years made it very exciting. Anand smiled to himself at how wet the woman was. Her body was both curvy and toned, and her large breasts were undoubtedly an object of beauty. The couple waited a week before going on a second date. In the opinion of both, it was no worse than the first, in fact, even better, as they explored each other's bodies and what each of them liked. Sex became a weekly affair, often changing days of the week, so Bryce couldn't keep track of it. Brittany used her excellent management skills to keep everything in order. Although she had always been worried that her husband would find out, after a few weeks, she began to even find it amusing that she had managed to hide her affair from him so easily. She felt taller and, frankly, smarter than her ignorant husband. Brittany. I was not deceived that this was not an affair. However, she felt that he did not take away one iota of love from her husband. She felt energized in both her marriage and her life. She has the love of her husband, and also a relationship with her lover. Although she did not love Anand as much as Bryce, she knew that her feelings for him were much more than simple lust. Brittany made sure she stayed with Bryce and gave him absolutely every ounce of love and lust she felt he wanted or needed. It seemed to her that she and her husband were closer than ever, and she would certainly find out if he guessed what was happening. At the same time, she still felt some tension, forcing her to keep her two lives separate. Because she worked alongside her husband, Brittany and her lover didn't have much time to do anything other than have amazing sex when they were together. Both knew that they had other interests and wanted to explore them further, but she knew that Anand wanted to devote more time to her, but she understood that this would not happen unless her husband left the city, and this rarely happened. She decided it was a wonderful problem to have two attractive men loving her. When Bryce found out a few months later, he was less optimistic. One evening, when he was alone because Brittany had to work late, he grabbed his wife's iPad from the table next to his chair instead of getting up and grabbing his laptop from his home office. When he logged into Amazon Prime to order some books, two addresses appeared in the Ship to Address box. The first was the England's home address, but the second belonged to Anand Patel, Brittany's boss, and it was not his usual home address. Bryce's eyes widened significantly as he looked at the second address. His immediate reaction was to feel sick to his stomach, but that feeling quickly turned to rage. He screamed, and his scream reverberated off all four walls surrounding him. Then he went to his liquor cabinet, poured himself a double shot of single malt whiskey, and began to make plans. The biggest problem for Bryce was that just a few minutes ago he would have told anyone and everyone that he loved his wife like crazy, and that feeling had not evaporated despite her cheating. If further investigation reveals that she was, in fact, cheating, he will have to understand his reaction and see if they can move on as a married couple. About an hour later, Brittany came home humming as she walked through the door. For the first time that Bryce could remember, he didn't jump up from his seat and rush towards her for a greeting kiss. This didn't escape Brittany either. "Hey, honey, is everything okay?" she asked, walking up to Bryce, who was sitting in his chair, reading the sports section of the newspaper. "Not even close," Bryce muttered, turning his head so that Brittany's intended kiss on his lips landed on his cheek. She stepped back and looked carefully at her husband. For the first time, the thought occurred to her whether he had somehow found out about her affair. Bryce caught the look out of the corner of his eye and knew he needed to stay calm until he could formulate a plan. It was not in his nature to act without preparation. Suddenly feeling un-British in herself, Brittany decided that discretion was the better part of valor and did not continue the conversation. She made a mental note to pay more attention to her husband's mood. Perhaps she takes him for granted. The next day at work, Bryce called his good friend, who was a lawyer. After Bryce explained his problem, the friend called his best investigator and brought him in on the case. 2 weeks later, Bryce had proof of his wife's infidelity, including photos and videos. "So what now, amigo?" his friend asked. For the first time since his parents were killed in a car accident 5 years ago, Bryce cried openly. Brittany tried to be inconspicuous, but over the next few days, after he did not greet her that evening, she carefully watched her husband. She knew there was no guile in Bryce, and she felt she would quickly know if he suspected she was having an affair. Brittany, I even mentally called it a novel. She knew it was wrong, but at the same time she couldn't convince herself that it was bad, especially since she didn't disdain Bryce in the least. After watching her husband for several days, the only difference Brittany could notice was in the bedroom. Bryce usually initiated sex as often as she did, but over the next week, he made no attempts at intimacy. When she did it herself a couple of days later, he looked reluctant, but then showed a level of physical power that he had never shown before. Bryce's newfound physical prowess in the bedroom was his only way to vent his growing hatred of his wife's infidelities. He stopped trying to get sex from Brittany, but when she started, he did everything to get his very powerfully. He was surprised that she didn't catch his anger. Not only that, she seemed to be enjoying this new Bryce. Bryce had his lawyer draft papers for a divorce on the grounds of adultery, even though in a no-fault state it made no financial sense. Divorcing your wife would be fairly fair since they earn the same money and don't have children yet. They will have to sell the house and split all the profits. I know it sounds crazy, but just hold the papers until I tell you, Bryce explained. I want to let this go on for a while longer, and maybe she will come to her senses. I love this stupid bitch, and maybe with some counseling. Are you at least going to demand an explanation? Asked John Jefferson. That would probably end things faster. Probably not. You know how stubborn Brittany can be. If I have to intervene, she will just be even more stubborn. Everything must come from her, and then, perhaps, we will have a chance. You are the boss. Tell me when. The papers will last as long as Twinkies. A year later, Bryce was completely amazed that his supposedly smart wife was oblivious to the rift between them. Gone were the little touches and glances between them. Intimacy was reduced to once a week, and when they were intimate, it was all about rough sex. Although Brittany may not have known it, Bryce noted that they had not made love since he found out about the affair. He was also amazed that Brittany was able to continue to pretend to be a faithful wife. She seems to have been able to successfully develop her career, maintain a strong romance, and keep up with all her hobbies and social activities. When he thought about it, he had to admit that it was all quite impressive. Since Bryce seemed reluctant to pull the divorce trigger, things could have gone on for a long time. But fate intervened in the form of Annan's promotion. He had been promoted to director in the company's London office and was due to leave within a month. Brittany was devastated by this development of events, although professionally she was happy for her lover. Maybe this is the God's way of telling us that it's time to end our relationship, Anand said. We've been doing this for 3 years now, and we've never gotten caught. I'd say we hit it very well, and maybe we got a little lucky. Over the next 2 weeks, both Brittany and Anand shed tears several times. Bryce noted to himself that Brittany seemed distracted at times. He wondered if the problem was the work or her relationship with Anand. Is something going on, baby? He asked. Brittany looked as if she wanted to say something, but resisted it and left the room. Bryce internally guessed that there were problems between the lovers in paradise and smiled. Lisa Patel was delighted both with the promotion her husband received and with the place where he was assigned. She grew up in London and had family there. She took it upon herself to pack her family's belongings for them, her 2 children and herself, to return to London a week before Anand was due to leave. This gave the lovers a week before Anand was due to fly to London from New York. Brittany, this plan seemed reasonable, but Anand was not convinced. She was scheduled to fly to New York on Friday and spend the entire weekend with Anand before he flew to London on Monday morning. The lovers could eat at nice restaurants, go to a Broadway play, and see some sights before saying goodbye for the last time. The only downside to this plan was that Brittany was going to tell her husband that she would be spending her last weekend with Anand. "Why tell him, Brittany?" asked Anand. "Just say it's a business trip. He'll never know." "How many business trips have I had over the years of working here? None. And suddenly I have to go for the weekend? Bryce may be gullible, but this seems far-fetched. If I lie and get caught, Bryce and I are done. But if I tell him the truth and appeal to his love for me, I really think we can get through this. It might hurt him a little, but he loves me unconditionally, and he's the most logical guy I know. It would be more logical to tell him," she explained. "Well, if you think this is right, you know him better than anyone," Anand said. "Brittany, I waited until the evening before leaving for New York to tell my husband everything." After eating and clearing the table, Brittany snuggled up with Bryce on the couch. As had been his custom for the past 2+ years, Bryce didn't press against her, but he didn't move away either. He seemed engrossed in watching the series. Brittany waited a few minutes, then cleared her throat. "I need to go away this weekend, Bryce." She sat silently at first, until her husband slowly admitted that he had heard her words. He looked at her silently. She laid out a plan for the weekend, starting with Anand's promotion, but never admitted to the ongoing affair. "So he's leaving for good, and after this weekend we won't see him again. We have feelings for each other, and we just need to finally connect. We've been experiencing these feelings for several years now, and we feel like this is a great way to end it all," Brittany said. "After this, he will be in London, and I will be here, and I will spend the rest of our lives making amends to you. We will not correspond. Let's not talk on the phone. Nothing. This will be completely over." Bryce did not expect such a statement. He could hardly keep his mouth shut, especially when she outright lied that they had never done anything sexual. "I was a good wife to you. You never knew anything about our relationship, and I never hide anything from you," Brittany said. Bryce tried to argue, but nothing came out of his mouth. He lowered his head and forced himself to count to 10. He thought about how much he should tell. "You can't do this, Brittany," Bryce said. "I don't care what motivates you. We made an oath, and you don't have the right to change the rules for weekend sex with another man. Does Lisa know about this? If so, I can't imagine she would be any happier about it than I am. Does she even know?" Brittany blushed a lot. "I don't know if Anand told Lisa. She has already left for London." "Listen, Bryce, I'm not asking you for permission to do this. I'll still do it regardless of your answer. We can talk more about this when I get back," she said. "I think that's why you waited until the last minute to tell me. You don't need permission, just forgiveness. Baby, you know you always give in to me when we argue. Sooner or later, you will realize that this will not harm us, and you will allow me to do this. Or later, you will forgive me," she said. "Not this time. That's the straw that breaks the camel's back," Bryce said. "You get on the plane, and it's all over between us." Bryce's last sentence sounded like a spiked glove hitting Brittany in the face. If she heard Bryce's words that this was the last straw, she did not attach any importance. Bryce thought about going to the guest room to sleep, but then decided he wouldn't let his wife kick him out of her bed. He was already asleep when Brittany went upstairs and climbed into bed. Bryce got up about an hour earlier than usual. Before leaving, he found Brittany's small suitcase ready to go on the bed in the guest room. But when he returned home a little after 5 in the evening, it was not there. He called his lawyer and said only one word: "Go." The taxi to the airport stopped in front of the hotel just after 3 p.m. Anand carried Brittany's suitcase into the car and placed it in the back seat. after which the couple tearfully kissed goodbye, only to be interrupted by a rude man tapping Brittany on the shoulder. The couple tried to ignore the annoying pester, but the man did not like it. "Brittany England? Are you Brittany England?" he asked. The couple broke the hug and both sighed in disgust. "Yes," Brittany barked. "Mrs. England, you have been served," the man said, placing a manila envelope in her hand. The hug was quickly forgotten. Tears flowed from Brittany's eyes. She handed the envelope to Anand, who tore it angrily. "Son of a bitch!" Anand shouted. "I thought you said he was a reasonable person, thoughtful or something." "You said it wouldn't be a problem. He had to act awfully fast to serve you so quickly." Brittany. I was crying too hard to think rationally. It was a long flight home. She wasn't surprised that Bryce didn't meet her at the airport. I took an Uber home. Bryce was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. There was a second cup in Brittany's place. She took the hint and sat up, tears already beginning to fall. "Please, Brittany, stop this damn waterfall!" I should be the one crying. "They cheated on me," Bryce said. "Brittany." She raised her head when she heard Bryce's words. The tears stopped immediately, but her blood pressure was through the roof. "It was not treason. I told you what I would do," she said. "Did I agree with your plan? No. That's why you changed. You don't have the right to make the rules. In this case, change them," Bryce said. "It was just one weekend in our entire married life," she said. 2.5 days out of thousands so far, and many thousands more to come. Do you really want to get a divorce because of this? Actually, no. I think I could come to terms with it, if that was the case, Bryce said, looking straight into his wife's eyes. For the first time, Bryce saw his wife break down. She just started doing the math in her head. "How ignorant do you think I am? This is not the first time for both of you. Yes, it was your first weekend, but you both have been having sex for over 2 years now, as far as I can tell. I have to give you some credit. For at least 2 years, you led a double life, the ideal wife and cheater. I held on, hoping that you would come to your senses and give it up, but with your timeless weekend, you crossed the line." Brittany, I felt dizzy, even though I was sitting. She took a sip of coffee, trying to collect her thoughts. "Why didn't you say anything before? Why didn't you try to stop me?" she asked, almost in a whisper. "When I found out, this had been going on for quite some time. I was hoping you'd stop because it's wrong, and because you love me." "He's stupid," he said. "But I love you," she said. "I didn't love you any less. But I love him too. I am capable of loving both of you. But you are my husband. You were always number one." "No, no, no, there is no number one, because there shouldn't be a number 2, or 3, or 4, he said. "There's only you and Anand. Well, now it's only you." "He left, and it was just you and me," Brittany said. "Well, now it's just you. I'm not in the equation anymore, baby." "Oh, come on, Bryce. He left. There is no reason for divorce," Brittany said. "If he hadn't left, would you have stopped having sex with him?" said Bryce. Brittany lowered her eyes. She didn't need to answer. "Why did you think you could have sex with him?" "How did it start?" he asked. "You know Anand, and you like him," she began before Bryce interrupted her. "Like Swasted," he said. "Okay, I understand, but he's a great guy. And after you, I think he's the sexiest man I know. And it just happened. And it happened. And it happened. And it happened," Bryce snorted when his wife looked displeased. "We developed real feelings for each other. This wasn't just cheap sex. You know I can never have cheap sex with someone. I love you both," Brittany said. "Arg! It doesn't work that way, baby. You can't love 2 people," Bryce said. "Have I ever taken anything from you? Ever refused you sex?" she asked. "Yes, you gave him what you swore would be exclusively mine. We both took an oath. There's so much more to it than sex, baby. Confidence, respect. Now that Anand is gone, I will expect you to replace him with someone else. Because you clearly don't respect me enough to not let something happen, Bryce said. I don't see the possibility of finding a third man in my life to love. Most people are lucky to find only one great love, but I found two. I'm already over my lifetime catch limit, Brittany said. You still don't understand, right? The only thing I don't hear from you is an apology, he said. I'm sorry I hurt you. I never wanted this, but I just couldn't tell you because I knew it was wrong, he interrupted. You don't regret the affair, do you? Bryce continued. Honestly, no, Brittany said. I love Anand. I loved our experience together. As I already said, I have two men whom I love and who love me in return. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Bryce shook his head in disbelief. He expected remorse and guilt. To his shock, he received neither. What about Lisa? He asked. She didn't know about this affair, did she? Not Nosla? Oh no, Brittany said. No need. Please don't tell me you told her everything. She didn't know. Oh God, she's going to hate me. Yeah, that's about it, Bryce said. Why did you tell her? Brittany asked. She shouldn't have found out. She must know. We were her friends. Just like his. They don't keep secrets from friends. And why shouldn't she know if this is such pure love, practically a love story for the ages? Brittany. She clenched her fists in despair, staring at her husband. You say it sounds cheap and tasteless? It wasn't like that, she wheezed. Surely Lisa will not agree with you as well as I, he said. They have 2 children, Bryce. You'll blow up their family, she said. Only if Lisa agrees with the way I look at it. If she agrees with your point of view, I think you're both safe. But if she agrees with my point of view, it still won't mean that I was the one who blew up their family. I didn't sleep with her husband, Bryce said. The next day, Brittany received a phone call from Anand while she was at work. Lisa, obviously, had not yet completed the divorce papers. But when Anand showed up at his new home in London, his wife did not even let him enter the door. I can't believe your husband did this to me, he shouted into the phone. I thought we were friends. Yeah, but I think he felt like his friend shouldn't have been sleeping with his wife for the last 3 years, Brittany said. I tried to explain this to him, but he doesn't believe me. He behaves very harshly towards everything. Never before has there been such a thing that I was not conceited in something. I think this is a little more than the color of the walls in the living room, Anand said dejectedly. A week passed before Bryce received a call from Brittany's parents. He always had good relations with his relatives, which became even stronger when his own parents died in a car accident. Have you thought about counseling, son? Asked his father-in-law. You both lived for 10 years. Weren't you planning on having children soon? Yes, but now I think it will never happen, said Bryce. Oh no, son. Don't let something small turn into something fatal, his father-in-law said. Something small? Asked Bryce. He quickly realized that Brittany had not been forthcoming with her parents, and he knew that the rest of the conversation would not be easy. She said you two didn't agree on something, but she didn't say that it was something vital, said his father-in-law. Where we disagreed was her long-term affair with her former boss. Did you know she cheated on me for over 2 years? On the other end of the phone, Ralph Carville gasped. It's a shock when someone tells a father that his little daughter is a cheater. Bryce then heard him asking his wife if she knew about their daughter's affair, and heard her stutter, but heard no answer. Damn it, Faith. He is also a member of the family. How could you do this to him? He heard Ralph shouting at his wife. How long have you known this? Damn woman. The incredibly stubborn Ralph got in touch again. Sorry, Bryce. I didn't know, but apparently my daughter and my wife had secrets from both of us. I know I didn't raise her to become a traitor. An affair for several years, and she thought you'd agree to this? Damn it, I raised an arrogant brat. Again, I'm sorry, Bryce. We're all sorry, Dad. Good night. Bryce couldn't believe it, but Brittany was fighting the divorce. It was all over when Brittany's lawyer suggested marriage counseling, and the judge chuckled. Are you serious, Mr. Liston? It is absolutely clear to me that Mrs. England had a long-term sexual relationship with her then-boss, and I have to assume that Mr. England did not want it. Honestly, only an idiot would agree to counseling after what he's been through. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. The only point of contention in the divorce was the dog, Hank. Bryce assumed the dog would go with him, but Brittany insisted that the dog stay with her because Bryce had given the dog to her. Finally, Bryce relented, but as he pulled out of the house, Hank jumped into the front seat next to the driver in Bryce's car. Brittany called repeatedly before forcibly pulling the large dog out, only to see it jump back in. "Keep the damn dog, you bastard!" Brittany shouted. Bryce noted to himself that this was the first swearing he had ever heard from his ex-wife. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.